Listen, I need to tell you something that might sound crazy at first, but stay with me. You know that feeling you get sometimes? That nagging sense that something's missing from your life, even when everything looks perfect on paper? That restlessness that hits you at 3 a.m. when you're staring at the ceiling, wondering if this is really all there is? What if I told you that feeling isn't depression or dissatisfaction? What if it's actually your soul trying to wake you up? See, here's what nobody talks about in those self help books or motivational speeches. We've been living inside a carefully constructed reality that was never designed for our highest good. Think about it. When was the last time you felt truly free? Not vacation free or weekend free, but genuinely, deeply free in your own skin? Most of us can't even remember, right? Here's something that'll blow your mind. In ancient Egypt, they had a concept called the Ka, your divine double, your higher self that exists beyond the physical realm. The Egyptians understood that we're not just flesh and bones walking around, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. But somewhere along the way, we forgot this truth. You want to know why? Because a spiritually awakened person is impossible to control. Think about your daily routine for a second. You wake up to an alarm that jolts your nervous system into stress mode. You check your phone immediately, flooding your brain with other people's opinions, crises, and agendas before you've even had your first conscious thought of the day. You rush through breakfast, sit in traffic while listening to news designed to keep you anxious, then spend 8 hours in a job that probably doesn't align with your soul's purpose. Sound familiar? This isn't living. This is survival programming. And the scariest part? We've been conditioned to think this is normal. But here's where it gets really interesting. Have you ever noticed how certain experiences can shift your entire reality in seconds? Maybe it was watching a sunset that brought tears to your eyes, or holding your newborn child for the first time, or that moment during meditation when everything suddenly made sense and you felt connected to something infinite. Those weren't just nice moments. Those were glimpses of your true nature breaking through the programming. The ancient Vedic texts talk about something called Maya, the veil of illusion that makes us forget our divine nature. But here's what most spiritual teachers won't tell you. This veil isn't just some mystical concept. It's being reinforced every single day through very practical, very real systems. Ever wonder why meditation feels so hard when you first start? It's because your nervous system has been trained for constant stimulation. Silence feels uncomfortable because in that silence, you might actually hear the voice of your higher self. And that voice has some things to say about how you've been living. Let me share something personal with you. 3 years ago, I was exactly where you might be right now, successful on paper, but spiritually starving. I had the house, the car, the relationship that looked perfect on Instagram. But inside, I felt like I was sleepwalking through my own life. Then something shifted. I started paying attention to the moments when I felt most alive. Not happy, alive. There's a difference. Happy is temporary, but aliveness, that's your soul speaking. For me, it was early morning walks before the world woke up. Something about the stillness, the way the light hit the trees, the sound of my own breathing, it all felt sacred. And in those moments, I started receiving what I can only describe as downloads. Not from some external source, but from a deeper part of myself that had been waiting patiently to be heard. Here's what I discovered. We all have access to this inner guidance system, but we've been taught to ignore it in favor of external validation. We ask everyone else what we should do with our lives, except the one person who actually knows: ourselves. The Sufi mystics have a beautiful saying: "You are not just the drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in each drop." Think about that for a moment. Every cell in your body contains the same genetic information that created your entire being. Similarly, your consciousness contains the same divine essence that created everything you see around you. But acknowledging this truth is dangerous to a system that profits from your feelings of separation and inadequacy. Here's a question that might change everything for you. What if the voice in your head that constantly criticizes, doubts, and fears isn't actually your voice at all? What if it's the voice of a collective programming that was installed before you were old enough to question it? The real you, the observer of your thoughts, the awareness behind your experiences, that part is untouchable. It's been there since day one, quietly witnessing everything, patiently waiting for you to remember. And when you do remember, when you start living from that place of inner knowing instead of external programming, everything changes. Not because your circumstances necessarily change overnight, but because your relationship to those circumstances transforms completely. You stop seeking permission to be yourself. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You stop dimming your light to make others comfortable. This isn't about becoming selfish or disconnected from others. It's about becoming so connected to your true self that you naturally radiate authenticity, compassion, and wisdom. It's about remembering that you came here not to fit in, but to contribute your unique piece to the cosmic puzzle. The question is, are you ready to stop sleepwalking through your own life? Because once you take that first step toward remembering who you really are, there's no going back to the old programming. And honestly, why would you want to? Your soul has been waiting for this conversation your entire life. What's calling to you right now as you hear these words? The war on your third eye. Look, I need to share something with you that might sound crazy at first, but stay with me. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and instantly sense something's off? Or when you dream about someone you haven't thought about in years, then they call you the next day? That's not coincidence. That's your pineal gland working. This tiny gland, smaller than a grain of rice, sits right in the center of your brain. Ancient civilizations called it the third eye. But here's what they didn't tell you in biology class: it literally has the same photoreceptive cells as your actual eyes. Think about that for a second. Why would you have light sensing cells buried deep inside your brain where no light can reach? But here's where it gets interesting. Ever notice how kids seem naturally more intuitive? They see things adults miss, dream more vividly, have imaginary friends that feel completely real to them. What happens as we grow up? We lose that connection. We're told it's just maturity, but what if it's actually calcification? See, your pineal gland is like a sponge for toxins. Fluoride, yeah, the stuff in your toothpaste and tap water, accumulates there faster than anywhere else in your body. By age 17, most people's pineal glands look like tiny rocks on brain scans. Coincidence that this happens right when we're supposed to become rational adults? I started questioning this when my grandfather, who lived to 94, told me He could always sense when storms were coming, days before the weather report. He grew up drinking well water, brushing with baking soda, eating food his family grew. His generation had abilities we've forgotten we even possess. Here's what nobody talks about: your pineal gland doesn't just produce melatonin for sleep, it produces DMT, the same compound found in ayahuasca. Your brain literally manufactures one of the most powerful consciousness expanding substances known to man. Why would evolution give us this if we weren't meant to use it? Have you ever wondered why meditation masters can survive on minimal food and sleep? Why some people can predict earthquakes or sense danger before it happens? Their third eye isn't clouded by decades of chemical buildup. The solution isn't complicated, but it requires commitment. Start filtering your water, not just for taste, but to remove fluoride and chlorine. Switch to fluoride-free toothpaste. Choose organic when possible, especially for foods known to concentrate toxins. But detox is only half the battle. You need to reactivate what's been dormant. Sunlight exposure, especially at sunrise and sunset, stimulates pineal function. Ever notice how those moments feel almost magical? There's a scientific reason. The truth is, you're more powerful than you've been led to believe. Your intuition isn't just emotion, it's information. Those gut feelings that saved you from bad decisions, that's your third eye protecting you. What would change in your life if you could access that guidance clearly again? Invisible sabotage of your awareness. Let me tell you something that happened to me last Tuesday. I was grocery shopping, just mindlessly throwing items in my cart like usual. Then I stopped, really looked around. Every aisle was a chemical maze designed to make me foggy, tired, compliant. You feel it too, don't you? That afternoon crash that hits like clockwork. The way your thoughts feel thick after certain meals. The strange tiredness that no amount of sleep seems to fix. What if I told you this isn't natural aging or stress? It's systematic dimming of your inner light. Here's something most people never connect. Your body is an antenna. Every cell vibrates at specific frequencies. When you consume processed foods loaded with synthetic additives, you're literally changing your vibrational signature. Ancient yogis knew this. They ate only pure foods because they understood that consciousness and nutrition are inseparable. Watch a child after they've had artificial colors and sugar. They become hyperactive, then crash hard. But notice something else. They also become more aggressive, less empathetic, disconnected from their natural intuition. It's not just hyperactivity, it's spiritual static. Your great grandmother didn't need antidepressants or anxiety medication. She also didn't eat food with 47 unpronounceable ingredients. Coincidence? She lived by natural rhythms, ate from the earth, breathed cleaner air. Her nervous system wasn't under constant assault from electromagnetic fields and chemical additives. But here's what really gets me: they've made the poison convenient and the medicine difficult. Fast food on every corner, but you have to drive miles to find organic produce. LED lights everywhere, but natural sunlight is something you have to consciously seek. Your phone pings every few minutes, fracturing your attention, while deep focus becomes a luxury. Ever notice how different you feel in nature? That's not just fresh air, it's your bioelectric field syncing with Earth's natural frequency. Scientists call it the Schumann resonance, but indigenous cultures always knew. We're electrically connected to everything around us. The solution isn't about becoming a hermit or living in fear. It's about conscious choices. When you choose real food, you're choosing clarity. When you turn off devices before bed, you're choosing natural sleep rhythms. When you spend time in sunlight, you're literally feeding your soul. Your body wants to heal. Your consciousness wants to expand. Your intuition wants to guide you. But first, you have to stop poisoning the very instrument through which you experience reality. Archons and the spiritual battlefield. Here's something that might make you uncomfortable, but I need you to hear it. That voice in your head that whispers, "You're not good enough." Where do you think it really comes from? You know, the one that shows up right before you're about to take a leap, start something new, or speak your truth. That's not your authentic voice. That's interference. I used to think I was just naturally anxious, naturally self doubting. Then I started paying attention to the timing. Every time I was about to step into my power, apply for that job, end that toxic relationship, start that creative project, boom. Suddenly I'm flooded with reasons why I should wait, why I'm not ready, why I should play it safe. Ancient wisdom keepers called these intrusive thoughts archons, energetic parasites that feed on human potential. But forget the mystical language for a second. Think about it practically. Have you ever noticed how your worst thoughts seem to come from nowhere? How they feel foreign, almost like someone else's voice using your inner dialogue system? Here's what changed everything for me. I started treating my mind like a radio. Sometimes you're tuned into your own station, your authentic thoughts, your inner wisdom, your creative impulses. But sometimes you pick up interference from other frequencies, static, noise, fear based programming that doesn't belong to you. Your smartphone picks up signals from cell towers miles away. Why is it so hard to believe your consciousness might pick up signals too, especially when you're stressed, tired, or emotionally vulnerable? That's when your energetic defenses are down. But here's the thing they don't want you to know: you have more power than any external force trying to influence you. You're not a victim of these energies. You're a sovereign being with the ability to choose which signals you amplify and which ones you tune out. I learned this during my darkest period: lost my job, relationship falling apart, drowning in self doubt. Then one night, instead of fighting these thoughts, I just observed them, like watching clouds pass by. And I noticed something incredible. They weren't actually mine. They had a different quality, a different tone than my authentic inner voice. Your real voice? It's calm, even when delivering difficult truths. It's encouraging, even when pointing out areas for growth. It connects you to possibility rather than limitation. The interference, it's urgent, dramatic, and always trying to keep you small. Every spiritual tradition understood this battle. Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness confronting temptation, not from a red devil with horns, but from the voice of limitation trying to keep him from his purpose. Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree as Mara whispered every doubt and distraction. They knew the path to awakening is learning to distinguish your authentic voice from the noise. So, how do you build your spiritual discernment? Start simple. When a thought creates fear without offering solutions, that's interference. When it connects you to your power and potential, that's authentic. When it tells you to wait for permission, that's static. When it encourages you to trust yourself, that's signal. The moment you realize you have this power to choose which thoughts to believe, which emotions to feed, which stories to live by, everything changes. You stop being a passive receiver and become an active creator. Ancient truths they don't teach in school. You know what's fascinating? Every culture on Earth, completely separate from each other, came to the same shocking conclusion about human nature. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt that moment of perfect clarity? Maybe during a sunset, or holding a newborn, or in deep meditation. That feeling where you suddenly know, not think, but know, that you're more than just skin and bones walking around? That wasn't a nice feeling. That was recognition. Your soul recognizing itself. Here's what they never told you in history class. The ancient Egyptians didn't worship gods the way we think. Their word netjer didn't mean external deity. It meant divine principle. They understood something we've forgotten. Divinity isn't somewhere else. It's the animating force behind your heartbeat right now. I was reading hieroglyphics in the British Museum last year. Yeah, they actually let you get that close. And there's this inscription that stopped me cold. Translated, it says, "Know that you are God experiencing yourself as human." Not metaphorically, literally. This wasn't religious doctrine. This was their science. The Vedic sages went even deeper. They had a word, Atman, which we translate as soul. But that translation misses everything. Atman isn't your personal soul. It's the universal consciousness wearing your personality like clothing. They discovered through thousands of years of inner exploration that what you call you is actually infinite awareness, pretending to be limited. Think about your dreams for a second. In dreams, you create entire worlds, complete with people who seem separate from you. You have conversations with dream characters who feel totally independent. But when you wake up, you realize you were every character, every voice, every experience. The Vedas are saying waking life works the same way. But here's where it gets practical. Your breath, something so automatic you rarely think about it, ancient cultures saw as the key to everything. In Sanskrit, prana means life force, but it's more specific than that. It's the intelligence that grows your hair, heals your cuts, and dreams your dreams while you sleep. And you can learn to work with it consciously. I started paying attention to my breath differently after learning this. Not just breathing exercises, but recognizing that each inhale connects me to the same source that moves the planets. Sounds crazy? Try it right now. Take 3 conscious breaths and tell me you don't feel more alive, more present, more connected to something vast. The Gnostics had another piece of this puzzle. They spoke of gnosis, direct knowing, not belief. They understood that truth isn't something you learn from books or teachers. It's something you remember from within. Because if you're divine consciousness in human form, then all wisdom already exists inside you. Every mystical tradition points to the same revolutionary idea. You're not a separate being seeking connection to the divine. You're divine consciousness, exploring what it's like to be human. The seeking ends when you realize what you've been looking for has been looking through your eyes this entire time. The mask you mistake for yourself. Can I tell you about the moment I realized I wasn't who I thought I was? I was 32, sitting in my car after another soul crushing meeting, staring at myself in the rearview mirror, and I had this terrifying thought. I don't recognize this person. Not physically, I look the same, but energetically, spiritually, I felt like a stranger to myself. See, somewhere along the way, I'd become a collection of other people's expectations. The good student who never questioned authority, the team player who never rocked the boat, the responsible adult who prioritized everyone's comfort over my own authenticity. I was wearing so many masks, I'd forgotten there was a face underneath. You know that feeling, right? When you catch yourself saying things you don't really believe, laughing at jokes that aren't funny, agreeing with opinions that make your soul cringe. That's not social grace. That's identity theft. And you're both the victim and the perpetrator. Here's something wild. Neuroscience shows that by age 7, your personality is 95% formed. Think about that. Before you could even tie your shoes, you'd already learned to hide your true nature to get love, avoid punishment, and fit in. The real you got buried under layers of shoulds and supposed tos before you even knew you had a choice. But here's what changed everything for me. I started asking a different question. Instead of, how can I be better at being me? I asked, who can Sham? Who am I when nobody's watching? Not when I'm performing for my boss, my family, my social media followers. Who am I in the silence between thoughts? Who am I before I remember to be anyone? You want to know what I discovered? There's a part of you that's been completely untouched by all the conditioning. It's been sitting there quietly, patiently, your whole life, watching, aware, present. It doesn't have opinions about your career or judgments about your appearance. It doesn't worry about tomorrow or regret yesterday. It just is. That's not your personality. That's not your ego. That's pure awareness itself. And it's been there since before your first breath and will be there after your last. Everything else, every story, every identity, every role you play is just costume jewelry draped over this invisible, indestructible diamond. I remember the first time I really felt this presence. I was walking my dog early morning, no one around, not checking my phone, not planning my day, just walking. And suddenly I realized I hadn't thought about myself as anyone in particular for the past 10 minutes. I wasn't John the marketer, or John the son, or John the guy worried about his mortgage. I was just awareness experiencing a morning walk. That's when it hit me. All my stress, all my anxiety, all my identity crises, they were happening to the costume, not to what was wearing it. The real me had been completely peaceful the entire time, watching the drama like a movie. The freedom in this is beyond words. When you realize you're not your thoughts, you stop taking them so seriously. When you realize you're not your emotions, they become weather patterns instead of permanent states. When you realize you're not your roles, you can play them without being trapped by them. What would your life look like if you stopped defending who you think you are and started exploring who you really are? Your body is the temple. Let me share something that completely changed how I see my body. I used to think of it as this inconvenient vessel that carried my consciousness around. You know, feed it, exercise it, fix it when it breaks. But last year, something happened that shattered that entire perspective. I was going through a rough patch. Anxiety through the roof, couldn't think straight, felt spiritually disconnected despite all my meditation and mindfulness practices. Then my doctor ran some tests and discovered my gut was essentially a war zone. Leaky gut syndrome, bacterial overgrowth, inflammation markers off the charts. Here's the part that blew my mind. Within 3 weeks of healing my digestive system, my anxiety vanished. Not improved, vanished. My thoughts became clearer than they'd been in years. And those spiritual practices I'd been struggling with, suddenly they felt effortless, natural, like tuning into a radio station that had finally come into focus. That's when I learned something they never teach you in biology class. Your gut produces about 90% of your body's serotonin, the neurotransmitter that regulates mood, sleep, and that sense of well being that makes spiritual connection possible. Think about that. The bacteria in your intestines are literally manufacturing the chemicals that determine how you feel about life. But here's where it gets deeper. Ancient traditions always knew this. In Ayurveda, they say Agni, digestive fire, determines not just physical health, but spiritual clarity. Traditional Chinese medicine maps emotional states directly to organ systems. They understood that you can't separate the body from consciousness because they're the same thing operating at different frequencies. Ever notice how different you feel after eating clean, whole foods versus processed junk? That's not just blood sugar, that's your entire energetic field shifting. Your cells are literally vibrating at different rates, depending on what you put into them. I started paying attention to this connection in ways I never had before. When I eat foods full of pesticides and artificial additives, within hours my thoughts become scattered, my emotions unstable, my spiritual practices feel forced. When I eat organic, nutrient dense foods, everything flows. My meditation deepens, my intuition sharpens, synchronicities multiply. Your body isn't just housing your consciousness, it's participating in creating it moment by moment. Every bite of food is information. Every breath is recalibration. Every choice about what you put into and onto your body is either supporting or sabotaging your awakening process. This is why healing your physical body isn't separate from spiritual work. It is spiritual work. When you choose real food over processed chemicals, you're choosing clarity over confusion. When you prioritize sleep and movement, you're creating the conditions for higher awareness to emerge naturally. Here's something most people don't realize. Your body holds trauma, yes, but it also holds wisdom. Indigenous cultures knew this. They understood that the body is an antenna, constantly receiving information from the environment, from other people, from subtle energies most of us can't consciously detect. When your body is inflamed, toxic, exhausted, that antenna gets static. The signals become unclear. But when you create internal coherence through proper nutrition, rest, and movement, suddenly you're picking up frequencies you didn't even know existed. What would happen if you started treating your body not as a machine to be managed, but as a sacred partner in your consciousness evolution? The breath code. I want you to try something right now before I say another word. Take the deepest breath you've taken all day. Not a meditation breath, not a yoga breath. Just fill your lungs completely. Hold it for 3 seconds, then let it all go. Did you feel that? That instant shift in your nervous system, the way your shoulders dropped, how your thoughts suddenly became quieter. That wasn't relaxation. That was remembering. Your body just reminded you of something you've forgotten how to do naturally. Here's what nobody tells you about breathing: you're doing it wrong. Not medically wrong, you're alive. So obviously your autonomic system works, but consciously wrong, spiritually wrong. You're breathing like someone who's forgotten they have superpowers. I discovered this during the worst panic attack of my life. Heart racing, couldn't think straight, felt like I was dying. My grandmother, who'd survived the Great Depression and raised 6 kids, sat beside me and said something that changed everything. Breathe like you're trying to fill a balloon in your belly, not your chest. Within 5 minutes, the panic was gone. But something else happened. Suddenly, I could think clearly in a way I hadn't in years. Colors looked more vivid. I could hear conversations 3 rooms away. It felt like someone had just cleaned the windows of my consciousness. That's when I learned something that blew my mind. Your breath directly controls your brainwaves. Slow, deep breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, not just the rest and digest mode, but the state where your brain produces alpha and theta waves. The same brain states mystics and visionaries have been accessing for thousands of years. Ancient cultures knew this. In Sanskrit, the word for breath, prana, also means life force, divine energy. They understood that when you change your breathing, you literally change the frequency your consciousness operates on. It's like tuning a radio to pick up stations you couldn't hear before. But here's where it gets really interesting. Modern life has trained you to breathe in a way that keeps you anxious, scattered, disconnected. Think about it. When you're stressed, your breath becomes shallow and rapid. When you're focused on screens all day, you actually hold your breath without realizing it. Researchers call it email apnea. You literally stop breathing properly when you're concentrating on digital tasks. This isn't accidental. A population that can't breathe properly, can't think properly, can't access their intuition, can't connect to that deeper awareness that would make them impossible to manipulate. Your breath is your most direct connection to your life force. Every mystical tradition understood this. Sufi dervishes used breath patterns to enter ecstatic states. Tibetan monks used breathing techniques to generate body heat that could melt snow. Navy SEALs used specific breathing patterns to stay calm under extreme pressure. But you don't need to be a monk or a warrior to access this. You just need to remember that your breath is intelligent. It responds to your intentions. When you breathe consciously, with rhythm, depth, and awareness, you're not just oxygenating your blood, you're literally rewiring your nervous system in real time. Here's the practice that changed my life. Every hour, take 7 conscious breaths. Not forced, not strained, just deeper and slower than normal. Count them, feel them. Notice how your entire internal state shifts after just the third one. Breaking the trance of culture. Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you might shake everything you thought you knew about your life. Right now, as you're listening to this, you're probably sitting in a room surrounded by objects you bought because someone told you they would make you happy. Maybe it's that expensive coffee maker gathering dust, or those designer clothes hanging unworn in your closet. But here's the unsettling truth. Most of what you call your choices aren't really yours at all. Think about your morning routine for a second. You wake up, check your phone immediately. Why? When did that become normal? You scroll through feeds of people living lives that make you feel inadequate. Then you rush to a job where you spend 8 hours pretending to care about tasks that drain your soul. At lunch, you eat food that makes you tired. Then you go home and collapse in front of a screen until you fall asleep, only to repeat it all tomorrow. Does any of this sound like the life you dreamed of as a child? Here's what's really happening. You've been living inside an invisible prison, and the bars are made of expectations that were never yours to begin with. Your parents, teachers, society, they all meant well, but they handed you a blueprint for living that was already outdated before you were even born. Remember when you were 5 years old and you wanted to be an astronaut, or a painter, or maybe you just wanted to spend all day talking to animals? What happened to that version of you? They didn't disappear. They were trained out of you, one be realistic at a time, one that's not practical at a time. But here's where it gets deeper. And this is something most people never realize. Even your stress patterns aren't really yours. Notice how you worry about the same things your parents worried about, how you react to conflict the same way your family did. You inherited their nervous system responses along with their beliefs about money, love, and success. The spiritual traditions have known this for thousands of years, what they call samskaras in Sanskrit, or inherited patterns that live in your very cells. But you don't need ancient texts to see it. Just watch how you tense up when your bank account gets low, even when you're financially secure. That's not your fear. That's generational programming running through your body. Here's the part that'll really get you thinking. What if the feeling you get sometimes, that sense that you're meant for something bigger, isn't just wishful thinking? What if it's actually your true self trying to break through all the layers of conditioning? Every time you feel that restless energy, that there's got to be more than this feeling, that's not dissatisfaction. That's recognition. Your soul recognizing that you've been living someone else's life. The beautiful thing is, the moment you see this clearly, really see it, everything starts to shift. You begin to understand that the voice in your head that criticizes everything you do isn't yours either. It's a collection of every authority figure who ever made you feel small. But underneath all of that borrowed noise, there's a stillness. There's a knowing. There's a version of you that never forgot who you really are. The question isn't whether you can change. You're already changing just by hearing this. The question is, are you ready to stop being who you were told to be and start being who you actually are?